When computers communicate across a network or the internet, they don't just send data randomly. Each type of service, whether it's web browsing, email or file transfers, uses specific protocols and network ports to make sure the data reaches the correct application. In this video, we're going to explore how TCP protocols, network ports and applications work together to enable communication across networks. I'm James. Welcome to our channel. Remember to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Now these concepts are an important part of the CompTIA Network Plus. Developed by CompTIA, and they form the foundation of how modern networks operate. We'll look at common protocols used in everyday networking, including HTTP and HTTPS for web traffic, FTP for file transfers, SMTP for sending email, DNS for translating domain names into IP addresses, and several other commonly used protocols that rely on specific port numbers. Understanding which ports and protocols are used by different services is essential for network configuration, troubleshooting, and security. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a clear understanding of how network ports direct traffic to the correct application and why these protocols are so important in real-world networking. So let's start by looking a closer look at what network ports are, how they function within the TCP/IP model. When you connect to a remote host using an IP address, you also need a port number. A port represents a specific place on the transport layer, acting as the endpoint of a conversation. TCP and UDP each use 16-bit port numbers, giving us a range of up to 65536 ports. Importantly, TCP and UDP do not share the same range. Each protocol has its own set of ports. For example, TCP port 4000 and UDP port 4000 are completely different. Every unique communication session can be defined as a combination of two ports, one on the client and one on the host. An application can use multiple transport protocols or multiple ports for a single protocol, but a single port on a host can be used only by one application at a time. The process is called port binding. An example, we connect to the web server and we do so through port 80, which is the standard. That means we set up a web server, you never have to worry that some other application is using it. On the other hand, our browser doesn't use port 80 as a source. Instead, the client typically use an ephemeral port or dynamic port held in a pool by the operating system and assigned to them for the duration of the connection. The IANA maintains an official list of port numbers with recommendations on how applications should use them. Ports are divided into three ranges. We've got system ports, goes from 1 to 1023, reserved for the most universal TCP/IP applications, also called well-known ports, also called privileged ports, since many operating systems require administrative privileges to bind an application to ports in this range. Then we get user ports, going from 1024 up to 49151, assigned to applications that aren't as standardized but still widely used. They called user ports because any user level application can bind to a custom port in this range. Private ports, which go from 49152 up to 65535, not officially assigned and available for temporary or private use. Most operating systems assign their pool of ephemeral ports from this range. Now, to make networking practical, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or IANA, has standardized port assignment. Here are some of the most common ones every technician should know. FTP uses TCP port 20 and 21 for file transfer. SSH uses TCP port 22 for secure remote access. Telnet uses TCP port 23. SMTP uses TCP port 25 to send email. DNS operates on TCP or UDP port 53. DHCP uses UDP ports 67 and 68. HTTP uses TCP port 80, while HTTPS uses TCP port 443 for secure web traffic. RDP or Remote Desktop Protocol uses TCP port 3389. And for multimedia, SIP uses TCP or UDP port 5060, RTP uses ports 5004 and 5005. As a technician, recognizing these ports assignment is crucial. They're not only important for configuring applications, but also for troubleshooting network issues and system security. In the next section, we'll look at the tools used to monitor and analyze port-based communication. Now, at the application layer, IP packets and transport layer protocols carry the data that supports the service we use every day. Each application protocol has its own purpose, features, and limitations. A great example is HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is the main protocol used by web servers. HTTP runs TCP port 80 and is connection orientated using TCP's features for reliability and error control. For secure websites, HTTPS uses instead operating on TCP port 443. HTTPS adds encryption and authentication features that keep communication private and protected from eavesdropping. Even though web browsers are the most common tools using HTTP and HTTPS, many other application protocols work in the background, such as DNS, DHCP, NTP, and LDAP. These application layer protocols support essential operating systems or operating system services, directory lookups, and time synchronization. Now, when it comes to email, multiple protocols work together to handle sending, receiving, and accessing messages. Each has a specific role and runs on its own port. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol or SMTP is used to send email from client to server and to transfer messages between servers. It usually runs on TCP port 25. The secure version, also known as SMTPS, uses TCP port 587 for encrypted communication. Post Office Protocol or POP is used by clients to download messages from mail servers. The current version is POP3, which operates on TCP port 110 or port 995 for the secure SSL TLS connection. POP is designed mainly for downloading email to a single device and storing it locally. Internet Messaging Access Protocol or IMAP is more modern protocol than POP. It allows clients to access and manage messages directly on the server, keeping them synchronized across multiple devices. IMAP uses TCP port 143 or port 993 for its secure SSL TLS version. The Messaging Application Programming Interface or MAPI is a proprietary protocol developed by Microsoft for Exchange email servers. It handles both sending and receiving email and integrates closely with Microsoft Outlook. Unlike the others, MAPI is used mostly within Microsoft-based networks rather than across the internet. Note that not all these protocols are used by standalone email clients, not webmail. Webmail uses HTTP through the browser to connect to an online client, which in turn uses these email protocols behind the scenes. So whether you're sending, receiving, or synchronizing messages, SMTP, POP, IMAP, and MAPI each play a vital role in how email communication works. Resource sharing protocols allow devices to share files, user information, or other resources across the network. While some are used on the internet, most are designed for LAN-based communication. However, each protocol can also present security risks, so it's important to understand their purpose and proper use. LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. manages directory information services across a network. It is widely used in enterprise systems like Microsoft Active Directory to query a central database of user accounts, printers, and other resources. LDAP typically uses TCP port 389 and the secure version LDAP over SSL, also known as LDAP-S, uses TCP port 636. Early versions were not very secure, but modern ones offer better protection and are mainly used on trusted LANs or VPNs rather than the open internet. NetBIOS, or Network Basic Input-Output System, is a session layer API that allows applications to communicate over a network. It is best known for legacy Windows system, where it enables file and print sharing as well as computer identification. NetBIOS uses UDP and TCP ports 137 to 139 and should only be used on secure, trusted networks as it isn't considered a secure protocol. Server Message Block, or SMB, allows folders and drivers to be shared over the network as if they were local. It's used not only by file servers but also by clients sharing files in peer-to-peer networks. SMB runs on TCP port 445 and in some cases it can also use NetBIOS. Modern versions are far more secure, but SMB is still mainly intended for use within LANs or VPNs, not directly over the internet. FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, is one of the oldest methods of transferring files across a network. It uses TCP port 20 and 21, but it's not secure by default. Two secure replacements exist, which is FTP-S or FTP Secure, which runs over TCP port 989 and 990 using SSL TLS encryption, and SFTP or Secure File Transfer Protocol, which also uses TCP port 22 and runs over SSH. FTP remains common for quick file transfers in controlled environments. TFTP, or Trivial File Transfer Protocol, is a simplified version of FTP designed for lightweight applications such as transferring firmware updates or system images. It has fewer features and does not include authentication or encryption, making it less secure. TFTP uses UDP port 69 and is often used internally within local networks. SQL, or Structured Query Language, is used to communicate with relational database systems, also known as RDBMS. Although SQL is a programming language, it also refers to the network servers used to connect applications to databases. Examples include Microsoft SQL Server, it uses TCP port 1433, Oracle SQLnet uses TCP port 1521, and MySQL, an open source option, uses TCP port 3306. These ports allow communication between front-end applications and back-end SQL databases. Understanding these resource sharing protocols from file transfer to database communication is essential for managing, securing, and troubleshooting enterprise networks. Each one plays a unique role in how data moves across local and wide area networks. Time synchronization is vital for network hosts. When device clocks are out of sync, problems can occur, especially in systems that rely on accurate timestamps such as logging, authentication, and encryption. Network systems don't depend on hardware clocks to stay accurate. Instead, they synchronize with time servers across the network. User applications rarely interact with these time protocols directly. The operating system manages time synchronization automatically, ensuring all devices use consistent system clocks. The Network Time Protocol, or NTP, it is the oldest, most common time protocol still in use today. Developed in 1985, NTP version 4 operates on UDP port 123. Now it can function on both client-server or peer-to-peer models or modes, synchronizing through a hierarchy of multiple time servers. Under ideal network conditions, NTP can achieve millisecond level accuracy, although performance can decrease on congested or asymmetric networks. SNTP, or Simple Network Time Protocol, simplified version of the NTP created for systems that don't require such high precision. Designed in 1992 and used the same port UDP 123, but only communicates with a single time server. SNTP trades precision for simplicity, making it suitable for devices that only need approximate time accuracy. Now, the Precision Time Protocol, or PTP, was developed to provide even higher accuracy than NTP, especially for critical infrastructure like financial systems, mobile networks, and scientific applications. PTP uses hardware-based time stamping to achieve sub-microsecond accuracy on local networks. Now, the original PTP version 1, introduced in 2002, and the PTP version 2, which is the current version, was released 2008 under the IEEE 1588 of 2019. PTP is typically used on local networks, though it's becoming more common in environments that demand extreme time precision. Time protocols are also important for security, which make them targets for attack. To address this, a secure version of NTP called Network Time Security, or NTS, was approved in 2020. NTS uses Transport Layer Security, or TLS, and authentication encryption with associated data, AEAD, to protect and encrypt time synchronization messages. It uses a different port, TCP port 4460, and is supported by many modern servers and clients. Accurate and secure time synchronization is essential for maintaining consistent logs, authentication validity, and reliable network operation. Whether it's NTP, SNTP, or PTP, each protocol ensures that every device on the network speaks the same time language, keeping systems coordinated and secure. NTP, or Network Time Protocol, is a globally distributed system designed to synchronize the clocks of all participating hosts. It's based on Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC, ensuring that every device, regardless of its time zone, can accurately adjust to local time. The physical location of an NTP host doesn't affect its synchronization accuracy. On a local network, NTP can achieve synchronization within millisecond. Across the public internet, accuracy is typically within tens of a millisecond, still sufficient for most applications. NTP operates at UDP port 123. Devices can request time data from a source using direct queries or by listening to a broadcast or multicast message. NTP timestamps are 64-bit for IPv4, 128-bit for IPv6, providing accuracy down to a fraction of a second. It also includes mechanisms for devices to measure latency, the time delay between themselves and the time source, and to detect and correct for potential clock drift or leap second caused by variations in the Earth's rotation. NTP typically follows a client-server model, but it can also operate in a peer-to-peer mode. In NTP, servers are organized into a hierarchy known as stratum levels. Each stratum defines how far a time server is from the ultimate reference source. Stratum 0 represents the reference clock, such as atomic clock, GPS satellites, and other highly accurate source synchronized to UTC. Stratum 1 servers are directly synchronized to Stratum 0 sources. They are prime time servers that provide the most accurate time to other servers. Stratum 2 servers synchronize to Stratum 1. They serve as secondary time servers and may communicate with multiple Stratum 1 sources for reliability. Stratum 3 and higher continue this chain, each referencing a lower stratum server up to a typical maximum of Stratum 15. Any higher than that, and the server is considered invalid as a reliable time source. Now, although Stratum 1 servers provide the most precise time, network latency can still introduce small variations. For best accuracy, clients should synchronize with the lowest possible Stratum server that's accessible and stable. However, real-world conditions like network congestion, route delays can affect synchronization precision. To prevent timing loops where two servers indirectly synchronize with each other, NTP devices monitor Stratum relationships carefully. This ensures a consistent, accurate, and reliable time hierarchy across the network. In short, NTP synchronization keeps global networks running smoothly, from time-stamping logs to securing authentication systems, by ensuring every connected device is on the same precise timeline. When setting up or troubleshooting a network, you often need to verify configurations, check connectivity, and diagnose problems. While many of these checks can be done through graphical interfaces, one of the fastest, most reliable methods is by using the command line tools. Every Windows and Unix-like operating system includes a collection of TCP/IP utilities for this purpose. These tools can give you detailed information about your network faster than navigating through system menus. Let's look at some of the most commonly used TCP/IP tools and what they do. ipconfig. In Windows, this command displays or refreshes IP settings for network interfaces. ifconfig. Used in Unix-like systems, it performs the same function, viewing or configuring IP settings. IP, a modern replacement for the older commands like ifconfig, arp, and root. Host name displays a set of system's local host name. Netstat shows detailed information about active connections, routing tables, and traffic statistics. ARP displays the IRP or IPv4 ARP cache, the table that maps IP addresses to MAC addresses. Root views or manipulates the system's IP routing table to find paths to network destinations. NSLOOKUP performs DNS lookups to find the IP address of a given host name. DIG, a more advanced DNS lookup tool offering detailed query and response information. Ping tests the reachability and latency of a host and can also help test throughput. Tracecert or traceroute displays a hop-by-hop path packet take to reach a destination, along with round-trip times of each hop. TCP dump captures raw network traffic. It's a powerful tool often used for packet and analysis and advanced troubleshooting. While most of these tools share similar purpose across systems, the exact syntax can vary slightly between Windows and Unix-based environments. Here's a general command line structure used for TCP/IP utilities. The command, this is the name of the utility you're running. The -p and the /all, these are options or switches that modify how the command behave. The IP address and interface name, these specify the target host or network interface. The angle brackets indicate required parameters, while square brackets shows optional ones. Mastering these TCP/IP tools gives network technicians the power to quickly diagnose issues, verify configurations, and confirm connectivity, all from the command line. In Windows, the ipconfig command is one of the most essential tools for troubleshooting network connectivity problems. It displays key TCP/IP configuration details for all network interfaces, including IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, subnet mask, and the default gateway. By using ipconfig, you can quickly verify whether your device has a valid, routable IP address or a self-assigned one, which often indicates a DHCP issue. To use the command, open the Windows command prompt and type ipconfig. This will show your current network adapter configuration. For example, you'll see your IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway listed under each adapter name. Disconnected adapters will be shown as media disconnected. You can extend the command with several useful parameters for deeper diagnosis. ipconfig/all displays full details for all interfaces, including physical or MAC address, DNS, and DHCP settings. ipconfig/release, an optional interface, releases the current IPv4 address for all or a specific adapter. ipconfig/renew, again optional interface, requests a new IPv4 address from the DHCP server, useful for restoring network connectivity. ipconfig/release 6 or renew 6 performs the same actions, but now just for IPv6 addresses. ipconfig/display DNS shows the contents of the DNS cache, entries stored from recent name lookups. ipconfig/flush DNS clears the DNS cache, especially useful when incorrect or outdated records are causing connection issues. ipconfig/register DNS refreshes DHCP leases and re-registers the computer's DNS records with the DNS server. Now, ipconfigure is especially valuable on networks using dynamic IP addresses, since it helps verify DHCP activity and DNS registration. Even on a static IP setup, it remains useful for checking configuration details or resolving DNS-related problems. Although ipconfig provides detailed network information, it doesn't directly change IP settings. It only reports and manages what already configured on the system. Whether you're diagnosing lost connections, refreshing DHCP leases, or clearing DNS errors, ipconfig should be one of your first tools when troubleshooting Windows network issues. The IP command is a powerful all-in-one utility that has replaced many older Unix networking tools. It allows administrators to view and configure nearly every aspect of a network, including adapters, ARP cache, routing tables, multicast groups, tunnels, TCP metrics, and IPsec policies. In general, the syntax looks something like this. The key part of the syntax is the object, because it defines which part of the networking system you're viewing or modifying. For example, to assign a new IP address to a network adapter, you want to use the following command: IP addr add 192.168.20.5/24 dev Ethernet 0. This command adds the IP address 192.168.20.5 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 to the Ether 0 adapter. The IP command supports several objects, each with a specific function. Here are the most important ones you'll see. ADDR views or manipulates IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, replaces the layer 3 functionality of ifconfig. Link manages adapter settings like MAC address, Ethernet properties, replaces the layer 2 functionality of ifconfig. NAY views or modifies ARP cache entries similar to the ARP command. Root views or change the routing table similar to the root command. MADDR views and manages multicast addresses or multicast address membership. The IP command includes many options for configuring and troubleshooting network connections. Let's look at some practical examples. To display help for a specific object, IP, the required object, help. To show status for an object, IP, the required object, show. To add or remove entries, we use the add or delete subcommands. For example, to add a new IP address, sudo IP addr add 192.168.20.5/24 dev ether 0. To add a static root, sudo IP root add 10.10.20.0/24 via 192.168.100.254. To view link statistics such as Ethernet error rates, IP -s link. To bring a network interface up or down, sudo IP link set Ethernet 0 up, or same command but just down. Most IP commands require super user permission, especially when making configuration changes. However, you can use many viewing options as a regular user. The IP command is extremely powerful. Once mastered, it becomes one of the most important tools for Linux and Unix-based network management. In summary, the IP command is a modern, versatile replacement for older tools like the ifconfig, ARP, and root. It provides complete control over network interface, routing, address configuration, all from a single consistent syntax. The if command is one of the classic tools used in Unix, Linux systems to configure and view network interface settings. If your Linux system doesn't include the IP root2 package, the IP command won't be available, and that's when ifconfig becomes essential. By default, ifconfig displays the address and diagnostic information for all active interfaces, but it can also be used to configure and modify them. ifconfig with the optional -a, a required interface and required settings. Now the syntax is for ifconfig is pretty simple. You specify an optional flag, the interface name, and then the setting you want to apply. Using the -a shows information for both active and inactive interfaces. Here are some of the most common settings you can configure using ifconfig. -a displays information for all interfaces, both active and inactive. Up or down enables or disables a network interface. DHCP release releases the current DHCP lease. DHCP start requests a new DHCP lease. IP address assigns a static IP address to the interface. Netmask address assigns a subnet mask. MTU and a value sets the maximum transmission unit or the MTU size. Promisc enable promiscuous mode, which is useful when running monitoring or packet capture tools. INET 6 used for IPv6 configuration, added after the IPv4 parameter. For example, this command sets a static IP address and subnet mask on the Ether 0 adapter. Sudo ifconfig Ether 0 10.10.20.5 netmask 255.255.0.0. Now this assigns the IP address 10.10.20.5 with a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0 to the Ether 0 interface. It's important to remember that the interface setting configured using ifconfig or IP are temporary. They lost after a reboot unless you make the changes permanent using a network configuration tool like Network Manager. While modern systems often rely on the IP command, ifconfig remains a reliable and simple utility for managing interfaces, especially on legacy or lightweight Linux systems. In Linux, the hostname command lets you view or set the computer's network name. This name is used for DNS and other name resolution systems, allowing your computer to identify itself on the network. Even if DNS isn't being used, the hostname is still important. The system's self-assigned hostname determines how it responds to local network requests, and if two devices have the same hostname, network communication problems can occur. By default, running hostname by itself simply displays the system's current hostname. You can also use it to change or display detailed naming information using specific parameters. Here are the most common parameters used with a hostname command. New hostname changes the computer's hostname to a new one. -A displays every fully qualified domain name or FQDN assigned to the computer. -I displays the computer's current IP address. -L lists all IP addresses assigned to the system. For example, to set a new hostname on a Linux system, use the following command: sudo hostname ncc-server1. This updates the device's name to NCC Server 1, which will be useful for all future network communication. Changing a hostname usually requires administrative privilege, and depending on the Linux distribution, the change might not persist after a reboot unless it's also updated in the system's configuration files like the etc hostname or etc hosts. Understanding and managing the hostname is essential for maintaining clear network identification, especially in environments where multiple devices communicate with the same local network. The netstat command is one of the most useful tools for monitoring network activity and troubleshooting connectivity problems. Even an ordinary user's workstation can maintain dozens of network connections at once, and netstat helps you see all of them in real time. It provides detailed statistics about active connections, listening ports, routing information, helping network administrators understand how traffic is flowing through a system. When we open the command prompt and type netstat, the output displays all active connections, including protocol type, local and foreign addresses, port numbers, and the current state of each connection. For example, you can see several TCP connections showing as established, meaning active communication is taking place between your computer and a remote server. Now, depending on your operating system, netstat supports a variety of parameters to refine the output and display specific information. Here are the most commonly used options. The -? displays help for system-specific options. -A displays all connections and listening ports. -B in Windows displays the executable or process that created each connection or listening port. -C continuously display network statistics, updating the output in real time. -E displays Ethernet statistics, including byte and frame sent or received. -F in modern Windows systems shows the fully qualified domain name or FQDN for remote addresses. -N displays addresses and ports numerically, skipping name resolution for faster output. -O displays the process ID or the PID associated with each connection in Windows. -P proto filters results by protocol, for example, TCP, UDP, or ICMP. -R displays the routing table. -S displays statistics for each protocol. And -T on a Linux shows only TCP connections. Now, on Linux systems with the IPRoot2 package installed, netstat can be replaced by the newer SS command, short for socket statistics. The SS tool provides similar functionality but includes improved performance and more detailed socket information. Now, in summary, netstat is a foundational diagnostic tool for viewing network connections, identifying open ports, and verifying which processes are communicating across the network. Whether you're troubleshooting a slow system or investigating security issues, it's one of the first commands every network professional should know. The ARP command is used to view and manage Address Resolution Protocol or ARP cache. The ARP cache stores mapping between IP addresses and their corresponding MAC addresses, which allows devices on a local network to communicate efficiently. While the ARP cache usually updates automatically, the ARP command can be used to manually display, add or remove entries when troubleshooting network problems. The parameters differ slightly between Windows and Linux, but their functions are similar. Below you can see a table with the Windows and the Linux commands and each one describing what they do. The first one is displaying the ARP cache and verifying or specifying an interface to show all entries. The second one adds an IP address and corresponding Ethernet address to the cache. And the last one deletes an entry from the ARP cache. Example there, if I say ARP minus A or minus I, 10.10.10.10, 192.168.1.150 would delete the entry 192.168.1.150 from the ARP cache on the 10.10.10.10 interface. Using the ARP command is especially useful when diagnosing connectivity issues on a LAN. It lets you confirm that IP to MAC address mappings are accurate and up to date. While ARP helps devices communicate with a local network, DNS handles communication across the internet by translating domain names into IP addresses. When you need to troubleshoot name resolution, you can use commands like nslookup, host, and dig. The nslookup command allows you to query DNS servers directly from the command line. It supports both forward lookups, finding an IP address from a domain name, and a reverse lookup, which finds a domain name from an IP address. So if I were to type in nslookup www.google.com, nslookup returns the IP address associated with a specified domain. You can also enter interactive mode to perform multiple lookups without restarting the command. nslookup opens interactive mode using the default DNS server. If I type nslookup minus server uses a specified DNS server. nslookup and a host name performs a single lookup using the default DNS server. nslookup host server performs a single lookup using a specified server. Now in Unix and Linux, there are two other useful commands, host and dig. Host -t www.google.com performs a simple DNS lookup using the TCP protocol. Dig java-tucano.com plus trace. The dig command is a powerful script-friendly tool used to perform detailed DNS queries. For example, using the plus trace option shows each DNS server that the query passes through before reaching the final answer. Together, ARP, nslookup, host, and dig form a powerful toolkit for diagnosing local and internet-based names resolution problems. Knowing them and how to use each of these commands is a key skill for every network technician. Then one of the most essential command line tools in networking is the ping command. Ping checks the connectivity between your computer and another device on the network or the internet. It measures key performance factors such as packet loss, latency, and the number of hops your data travels through. To do this, ping sends a series of ICMP echo request packets to a destination and waits for the echo replies to return. The syntax is simple, ping with the option and destination. The destination can either be a host name such as www.google.com or an IP address. By default, ping in Windows sends 4 packets, 1 second apart. In Linux, it continues to send packets until you manually stop it using the Control-C. Once it stops, ping displays a summary of the results, including the number of packets sent and received and the average round-trip time. The available options for the ping command vary between Windows and Linux, but the core functionality is the same. In Windows, -n an account, Linux -c an count sends a specific number of pings. Windows, I've got -t, keeps pinging continuously until stopped. -a in Windows attempts a reverse DNS lookup of an IP address. Minus L size or minus S size sets the size of the packet. The default is 32 bytes. Minus F or minus M for Linux or capital M prevents packet fragmentation to test maximum transmission size or the MTU. Minus I TTL or T TTL in Linux sets the time to live value for packets. Minus capital S interface or minus L interface sends packets from a network specific network interface. Minus W timeout or a capital W timeout sets the response time. Minus 4 6 for either or focus or forces the ping for IPv4 or IPv6. On some systems, IPv6 is handled by ping 6. Here's a few practical examples you might want to use. Ping www.ncc101.co.za checks the connectivity to a website. Ping N 10.8.8.8.8 sends 10 echo requests to Google's public DNS server. Ping -6 IPv6.google.com tests IPv6 connectivity. It's important to remember that ping replies can be blocked by firewalls or network security policies. So if a device doesn't respond to a ping, it doesn't always mean the network is down. The system may simply be set to ignore ICMP requests for security reasons. In summary, the ping command is a fast, reliable way to test network reachability and measure connection performance. It's often the very first command a technician uses when diagnosing network issues. Now, when a simple ping isn't enough, you need to know how your packets are traveling across the network. That's where traceroute comes in. The traceroute command, or tracecert in Windows, shows the exact path data takes from your computer to a remote host. It identifies each device or a hop along the route and measures how long it takes to reach them. This information helps network technicians locate routing issues, high latency, or overloaded routes that slow down network communication. Just like ping, traceroute can target a host name or IP address. Each hop along the route represents a router or gateway that your data passes through. Traceroute doesn't just show the total time it takes to reach the destination, it reports the round trip time to every single hop along the way. That means you can pinpoint exactly where delays or connection problems occur. In this example, the traceroute command traces a path to www.36bird.com. We can see multiple hops, each showing an IP address, domain name, and the response time in milliseconds. If any hop shows an asterisk or unusually high latency, it could indicate packet loss, congestion, or a router problem at the point of the network. Traceroute supports a few useful options that vary slightly again between Windows and Linux systems. -D in Windows, -N in Linux disables reverse DNS lookup, showing only IP address for faster results. -H maximum hops in Windows or M max hops in Linux sets the maximum number of hops to trace. The default is 30. -W MS or -WS specifies the timeout between each hop is considered unreachable. -T in both Linux and Windows uses TCP port 80 instead of ICMP echo requests. It is useful for networks that block ICMP. On some systems, IPv6 routes are traced using traceroute or by adding the -6 parameter. While traceroute is part of the network exam, modern network tools like PathPing in Windows or MTR in Linux can provide even more detailed results. These tools combine the functionality of ping and traceroute, giving you both latency and packet loss data in a single view. In summary, traceroute is a valuable diagnostic command for mapping the path packets take through the network, identifying where issues may occur, whether you're troubleshooting internet slowdowns or checking routing efficiency. Traceroute helps you see exactly what's happening along the way. When troubleshooting network connectivity, the best place to start is often the command line. Here you can quickly test device connectivity, verify IP configuration, and isolate where a network failure occurs. Using tools like ping, ipconfig, ifconfig, IP, NSLOOKUP, and Traceroute, you can determine whether the issue lies with a network, a device configuration, or an external device. When you need to confirm that your computer can reach another host or network, ping is the first tool to try. If you can't reach any host, it might be a local issue, such as an incorrect IP address setting or a blocked subnet. If ping resolves IPs but not host names, it's likely a DNS problem. High latency combined with a low time to live may indicate a routing issue. Packet loss can signal congestion, interference, or a hardware problem. If you suspect the MTU issue, typing with the -L or -F options to test packet fragmentation. If ping works fine, but apps fail, the issue might exist at a higher layer, such as the transport or application level. Next, using ipconfig, ifconfig, or ipchecks adapter configuration. Multiple active adapters can cause conflicts, disable unused ones. Link local or APIPA address means there is no valid DHCP assignment. Duplicate IP or MAC addresses can cause unpredictable behavior. Incorrect subnet mask or gateway can isolate the device from other networks. Incorrect DNS settings leads to a name resolution error. Try releasing and renewing the DHCP lease using the ipconfig/release or ipconfig/renew. If connectivity still fails, even with a valid setting, the issue is likely physical, such as a cabling, a port, or a switch itself. Protocols like DHCP, DNS, and NTP rely on higher layer services that can fail independently of the lower layers. Check for firewall rules. They may block a working service. Verify a DHCP server are reachable and not out of IP addresses. Test DNS resolution using the NSLOOKUP. For NTP, ensure a valid time server is configured and reachable. If ping works but performance is poor, examine traffic flow using NetStat or your OS's built-in monitoring tools. Look for unusual network activity, high connection count, a process consuming bandwidth. To trace the path of network packets, use Traceroute or path ping. If the route stops responding, that hop might be down or filtered. High latency suggests congested routers or overloaded networks. Now, let's practice the built-in Windows TCP IP tools. In this exercise, we'll check IP configuration, view the ARP cache, and test network connectivity to an external website. After Windows, we'll explore how to use Linux command line tools to view and troubleshoot TCP IP network settings. Now, these commands can be used on a Linux system, but in this example, we'll be using Kali Linux. Now, before you begin, make sure your system is connected to the internet and that DNS resolution is working. On to the first exercise. In this exercise, we'll be looking at the built-in TCP IP tools using Windows. Now, you can use the same tools in any version of Windows as long as it's got a working DNS server and internet access. Now, to access these, we need to go to our command prompt, typing in CMD, hitting enter, opens our command prompt. From here, we can type a command such as ipconfig. Now, this displays adapter information along with IPv4, IPv6 addresses, subnet mask, and also default gateway. Now, viewing more detailed information, we can type in /all. Now, as you can see, it gives us a whole lot more information along with physical address, DNS servers, and also DHCP settings. Now, if I were to view detailed command usage, I can type in ipconfig / and a question mark, and it gives me a breakdown of all command usage. Now, as we can see here, there's our release, release 6, renew, and renew 6. One quick question. Now, how would your options differ if you were using ifconfig in Linux? Now, apart from the syntax working a bit differently, you can also configure static IP addresses and several other interface settings. Let's view our ARP cache. Let's type in ARP. Now, as you can see, just typing in ARP gives us the documentation for using ARP. So I can type in ARP -a and it would give me my ARP cache, or the exact results here might differ depending on your recent network usage. Another command that we use a lot is the ping command. And right, now the first thing you notice there is your connectivity and latency to the National Weather Service are displayed, noticing the fully qualified domain name showing its ping isn't the same as the one you entered. Now, as we can see there, it says Akamai edge.net. Right, let's do an NS lookup on the same website, which is the weather.gov, and it will give us NS lookup information or DNS server information. And it says there, Akamai Technologies is the content delivery service that, among other clients, hosts the NWS website. Now, the DNS lookup data for the website is displayed. For www.weather.gov is actually an alias for the particular Akamai edge.net fully qualified domain name. Let's do a tricert to the very same website, .gov, and as we can see there, tricert shows ping times to each router hop between you and the destination. Now, in this case, there's only one. This might not show the whole working picture. Next, we were using the TCP/IP tools on Linux. Now, you can perform this on any Linux computer with a working DNS server and internet access. Now, I'll be using Kali Linux. Now, to use any of the commands, we need to open a terminal window. So let's go ahead and open our terminal window. The first command we'll be looking at is ifconfig. Now, just typing in ifconfig and hitting enter, we can see that it shows us information about our Ethernet 0 and our local loopback adapters. It also shows IP and Ethernet settings along with connection statistics. Let's use the next command, our host name. Now, as you can see, the command by itself only shows the computer name. Since there's no fully qualified domain name set, it doesn't show any IP addresses by default. Now, using the same host name with a -i, now as you can see there, it shows us IP address settings and it does not give any other information. Now, by typing in IP addr show, we can view all address information for both adapters, including IP address, MAC address, MTU settings, and more. Now, checking network connectivity. For that, we're going to use the ping command. So let's go ahead and ping.linux.org, hitting enter. Now, unlike Windows, the ping command in Linux doesn't quite work the same. It doesn't stop. So to make it stop, we need to press the Control-C key to break the signal and return us to the prompt. Now, next up, let's look at traceroute. Right, so our trace route in this case does not provide us with too much information. Now, as you can see there, it goes on. Now, there is typically better tools to use. Unfortunately, it's not available to us right at the moment. Right, now you can see there it does not provide us with any useful information. Now, viewing other network information, let's start off with our ARP cache. Now, ARP cache shows similar information, results to the Windows equivalent, just like the ifconfig. It is not on many new distributions by default. Next command we're going to type in is IP nay and show. Let's see what it provides us with. Now this is to check the ARP cache with IP root 2. The format is different, but the same information is given as the previous command. Now if we were to type in root, now here it gives us information about the kernel's routing table. It's pretty simple on the system, but a host configured as a router would be different. Next, let's look at net stat. Again, it shows all listings for TCP ports with port numbers. Currently, it's just port 22 that is listening, and it's the SSH daemon. All right. Next up, let's use the SS listener. Again, it provides the iproot2 SS command as functions and options similar to the netstat, but it's faster and also more flexible. Right, now it's very important that a person goes out, practice these commands, make sure that you understand them, have a good idea what their output looks like for any practical exams or practical assessments, so that you are familiar with what the output looks like. And if I were to provide you a screenshot of a particular result, that you at least have some sort of an idea what the input command was. Now that's it for this lesson. See you in the next lesson.